You're listening to the Vocabit podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode 19 of the Vocabit podcast. I'm Erica Abbott, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the eponymously named vocabulary company, Vocabit. I am so excited about this podcast because I've got a good old-fashioned vocabulary-boosting story for you guys. We've taken a bit of a break from those for the 5 Ways to Instantly Sound Smarter mini-series, but fun stories that just painlessly boost your vocabulary really are the heart of Vocabit. If you're new here, the research indicates that you are pretty likely to remember a word if you encounter it 8 times. And traditional learning techniques engineer those 8 impressions through flashcards, study guides, things like that. But the problem is, most of us dread or fight those techniques because they're not how our brain has been programmed to learn language. Your parents probably didn't put flashcards and study guides in your crib when you were learning your native tongue. You likely learned upwards of 10,000 words, if not tens of thousands of words, just through randomly encountering them without specifically studying them. So if the goal is to get those 8 impressions to learn new words for the SAT, and presumably to make the experience as painless as possible, the absolute best way to accomplish that, in my opinion, is through stories. Stories replicate how your brain originally learned language, so we're utilizing existing neural pathways. It's the same reason immersion is the most effective way to learn a new language. It mimics how your brain learned its native tongue. And what I'm trying to do with Vocabit is essentially engineer an immersion experience, but for SAT words. I talk to you, I tell you stories, and I weave in big words throughout it all to get you those 8 impressions so you don't have to get them banging your head against a study guide. So let's dive into today's vocabulary boosting story. I had the idea for this one a couple of years ago when the last Pitch Perfect movie came out. If you haven't seen the Pitch Perfect movies, they're about an a cappella group at college and all their shenanigans. I thought they were pretty funny. And I thought it might be fun to write a little Pitch Perfect mystery. But there are a couple of disclaimers I need to make before we dive in. The first is, if you haven't seen the movie, Fat Amy is what the character played by Rebel Wilson calls herself. It's what she goes by. That is obviously not a way that I would personally choose to describe someone. The second disclaimer is that this is obviously fan fiction. I don't own the rights to the Pitch Perfect movies or anything like that, but I do think that this story would be a good little skit for SNL, or if they decide to make another movie, something like that. So if you work at SNL or are affiliated with the Pitch Perfect movies and would like to use this storyline, talk to me because I think this would be really cool. And the third disclaimer is that one character does get sick in this story, but I'm not making light of anything that's going on right now. I had the idea for this story years ago, and it's just a fun, lighthearted story. It's not about COVID. If you are not yet a Vocabit member, I highly suggest hitting pause on this podcast really quickly and heading over to vocabit.com to sign up. You'll be able to read along to the story, which is amazing because it gives you an extra impression to all of these vocabulary words, essentially doubling your learning potential. Instead of getting 1 impression just through your ears, you're getting 2 impressions, and you're utilizing 2 different senses, which other studies show can also really turbocharge your learning. The other amazing thing about being a Vocabit member is that in addition to being able to read along, I've also included contextual definitions of these words at the bottom of each page because presumably if we're still learning these words, you don't yet know what they all mean. So being able to just quickly glance down and see what some of these words mean can make the experience more enjoyable now while we're still learning everything. All right, let's dive in. The Pitch Perfect Crime, a vocabulary-boosting short story by Erica Abbott. Fat Amy sneezed. Her fellow Bellas, singers from the premier a cappella group at Barton University, shied back in a way that they hadn't since the great sophomore fart. Their motivation, however, wasn't prompted by a mere desire to avoid the malodorous emission, as it was then. No, a sneeze in December meant something far more sinister. Germs, the kind that cause your throat to go scratchy, your nose to go stuffy, and your chance at beating the troublemakers in the semifinals to dissipate into nothingness. It's nothing, Fat Amy sneezed again. Back to the riff-off, everyone. Poppin' bottles in the... Ice, ice, baby? Becca chimed in uncertainly. Vanilla, ice, ice. Baby got back. Aubrey, the snooty blonde and co-captain of the Bellas, finished, holding up a hand for silence. Fat Amy, this is serious. How could you let this happen? I don't know, she said, wiping snot from her nose with the back of her hand. The other Bellas discreetly stepped further back, and Fat Amy continued. Unless? I've been going to the library, Fat Amy confessed, in tones one might use to admit stealing gum from the store. And? Well, nothing good happens in a library, does it? I literally have no idea what you're talking about. It was the butler in the library with the candlestick. Amy air-bashed a ghost over the head. I've been sitting at the same table each night. Becca interjected. Are you suggesting someone tried to get you sick? That some elaborate scheme is afoot? Not someone, Fat Amy said. Bumpa. We're on the outs. It was Bumpa in the library with a tissue. A soggy tissue smeared on my desk before I got there. I'm sure of it. The faces of the other Bellas contorted into various expressions of disgust. In that case, Aubrey said, we have some revenge to plot. Bellas, gather round. Fat Amy, go sit in the bleachers. Holler down any ideas. Fat Amy gave Aubrey a look of withering scorn, sitting down on the gym floor instead. Fine here, thanks. And just think, if I weren't so brilliant, this could have been the perfect crime. The pitch-perfect crime, more like, Aubrey snapped, pointing to the bleachers. And unless you want to get pitch-slapped, I'd get moving. Bellas, hand sanitizer, then vengeance. Okay, that was our little pitch-perfect mystery. I don't know why I always write stories with accents because I have like the worst accents ever. But yeah, this was my first crack at an Australian accent. Forgive that. I will be back on Tuesday with another vocabulary boosting short story for you guys. If you are enjoying my painless story-based approach to learning, I highly encourage you to apply for the Vocabit Ambassador Program. It's a great way to boost your resume over the summer and earn some extra money by helping me get the word out about Vocabit. You can learn more and apply at vocabit.com/ambassadors. And last thing, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who has left the podcast a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. They mean the world to me. And if you haven't already left one, you can leave a little note if you want, or if you just hit the 5 stars, that's also amazing. I would appreciate it so much. All right, I will see you guys on Tuesday.